Prime Minister David Cameron has said that this is a most appalling crime and that there are strong indications that it was a terrorist incident. One of those meetings has already taken place and the decision was taken to increase security outside other army barracks in and around London. The incident has been met by horror from politicians from all sides of the political spectrum. People are very shocked that this has taken place, but if indeed it is confirmed as an act of terror carried out by Islamic extremists, well then it's a brutal act that is very unprecedented for the UK. It presents a new reality for the British government and a new problem to face, really, because this wasn't a plot. It wasn't a sophisticated bomb plot like the ones we've seen foiled in recent years. It wasn't anything like the July 7th bombings with the buses. This is a brutal and very basic attack in the middle of a London street in broad daylight outside of a primary school. The likely motivation for this brutal killing looks to be, some people are speculating, British involvement abroad. We know that the British Army has been involved in conflicts in Libya, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and William Hague, also the British Foreign Minister, has recently been calling to arm the Syrian rebels, and Britain's been heavily involved and actively campaigning to arm the Syrian rebels, and they've been helping them and providing support in other ways. And we also know that Islamists have threatened, actually, a number of times to behead a British soldier in retaliation for military involvement in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya. And in fact, 6 years ago, a group of British Pakistanis based in Birmingham were convicted of plotting such an attack. But today, it looks like that attack may have taken place. It's not confirmed yet, but that's what a lot of people are talking about. And it's already causing a number of commentators to make the link between British involvement and this sort of what looks to be like a homegrown terrorist attack. We've had the British MP George Galloway saying today, to quote, "This sickening atrocity is exactly what we're paying the same kind of people to do in Syria." So in the view of some, it's British involvement abroad that's increasing the danger for the British people at home with the attack that we've seen.
It is true that David Cameron and Hague are at the forefront, along with François Hollande in Paris, trying to support the rebels that are hacking to death Christians, Muslims, people of no faith at all in Syria. Perhaps people would have seen how alike the events in Woolwich were to the hacking we saw in the streets of, I think it was Homs. But of course, that kind of attack has been occurring all over Syria, except, as I said, the British government is supporting the people with the machetes. I have to say, when I first heard about this at 2 o'clock our time, and that it was a machete and then it was involving knives, and then, of course, the inevitable, there were Islamists, or there was some connection to Islam, one had to think, was the machete being supplied by William Hague? In no way will they change their foreign policy. If anything, they won't change their foreign policy. They will react completely wrongly, just as they did after 7/7, invent new MI5 operations to infiltrate Muslim communities, create more antagonism, and inspire more events, if the past is anything to go by, more tragic, terrible, vile events like the ones we saw today in Woolwich.
And here at RT, we've also got some reaction from across the Atlantic. Brian Becker from the Anti-War Answer Coalition. He believes such violence could have been predicted ever since the UK first embraced America's foreign policy actions abroad.
This was a disgusting attack, a terrible assault, a murderous attack, one that people are sickened by throughout the UK and all over the world. But when we look into the broader context, we have to, I would say, note two particular things. One is there is an escalating cycle of violence that is predictable and was predicted. The British, along with the British, meaning the British government, not the people, joined George W. Bush in the invasion of Iraq, support the war in Afghanistan, were principals in demanding the bombing of Libya, along with the United States and France and NATO, are arming the same rebels in Syria. So the British colonial past and its current legacy of intervention in war is undoubtedly a factor. The other thing, though, that we have to think about is, will this lead to the targeting of immigrant populations, black populations, Muslim populations, for a new round of universal type demonization or criminalization? And that's something we have to also be on the lookout for and be against.
We've seen a fourth night of violence here in Stockholm. Wednesday had been relatively quiet. We'd seen community leaders out on the streets trying to stop young people from rioting, from setting fire to cars and other things. As you can see from what's going on just behind me, once they've gone in for the evening, it seems that the cars have gone up. The people have started setting more fires. We've seen stones thrown at the police, at journalists as well. It's all continuing from what we've seen start on Sunday here in Stockholm. Now, all started following a police shooting of a 69-year-old man. He was killed by police officers in his apartment, apparently holding a machete while he was slain by police. That started the first night of violence. That's continued throughout the week here in Stockholm. Now, talking to community leaders, they say that one of the reasons for this has been down to unemployment here in these particular areas. I'm in the suburb of Husby, which is not too far from the centre of Stockholm. It's been one of the worst hit areas by violence in recent nights. They're saying that although Sweden's unemployment figures are actually below the EU average, when you look at youth unemployment, we're talking about the under 25s, nearly a quarter of the Swedish population are out of work. And if you look at the people who have been taking part in the violence that we've seen, they are all very, very young people indeed. That's one of the reasons why earlier on Wednesday evening, it seemed like things were under control when we saw parents and religious leaders out on the streets. It seems though that once they've gone to bed, then the trouble has started again as violence continues to rack the Swedish city.
The US Senate committee has voted for a bill to arm the Syrian rebels who are trying to topple President Assad's regime. It's the first time in 2 years of the ongoing civil war that America's lawmakers have agreed to give the battling opposition lethal support. However, the bill still has a long way to go before it could come into force. Author and historian Gerald Horne believes Washington has learned nothing from its past mistakes.
Pressure has really been ratcheted up in Washington with regard to these rebels. The Israeli lobby in particular has been quite energetic and quite active with regard to lobbying for aid to the rebels, which is quite curious, since if these rebels come to power, I dare say that Israel will have many sleepless nights. The implications are quite ominous. Obviously, the U.S. authorities have not learned the lessons of history. For example, we recall that in Afghanistan in the 1980s, the United States supported extremists, and then on September 11, 2001, those extremists and those allied with them attacked New York City and Washington. We recall that the U.S. authorities backed extremists in Libya, and then on September 11, 2012, those extremists killed the U.S. ambassador, Chris Stevens, in Benghazi, and it's plunged the Obama administration into a round of investigations. Sadly and tragically, it seems that they would like to see history repeat itself.